Hello, everyone. Today, on behalf of my co author, Antigone Papadimitriou, I would like to share with you our research on thinking green, living plastic, why sustainability still costs too much. So, let's start. So, first, let's look at the motivation for this project. Many people care about sustainability, yet plastic remains everywhere. Why? So, one reason why we can't resist using plastic is because there's a gap between our pro environmental attitude and intention and how that intention translates into behavior. So, there are several meta analyses in the literature that shows the increased public willingness to reduce single plastic use. However, the actual behavioral change remains abysmally low. So there are several reasons. One reason is the systemic influence on our choices. Plastic consumption remains very high because we live in a system where convenience, cost, and disposability are prioritized over sustainability or responsible consumption. Next is frustration and moral fatigue. Even though when we have good moral values, we care about the environment and we want to be moderate, temperate in terms of our plastic use, somehow we grow very tired of aligning our attention, our intention with our environmental and sustainable action. Last but not least is maybe our moral agency is not enough, it's not sufficient, and there's a need for systemic change, for a structural solution. And that is one reason why we embarked on this study, to understand the structural moderators or the factors that limit our individual linkage between our good intention and our sustainable behavior. So, in this study, our core argument is that the reason we persist at irresponsible behavior or lack of sustainable behavior is because of the friction, right? We view plastic as the lowest friction option because of its convenience, of its pervasiveness. Currently in the United States, the focus is on downstream waste management. For example, we encourage people to recycle plastics. So that puts the pressure onto individual consumers rather than on producers and manufacturers. And because of that, it is very difficult to reduce plastic consumption when the recycling rate of plastic is very low. And another argument that we want to bring out is the search cost is another friction. The search for an alternative to plastic can be very expensive, and therefore sustainability awareness or environmental awareness is not sufficient. So our argument is we need to bring in the transaction cost economics model to explain why there is a gap between our intention and our behavior. In other words, sustainable behavior may require aligning the system with moral virtues such as virtue of temperance, virtue of care, virtue of intergenerational responsibilities, because virtues alone will not translate to sustainable behavior. So, in this study, we propose to integrate three theories. We would like to integrate the theory of plant behavior, in which the intention is formed through attitude, intention, and behavior. So there are meta-analyses showing the support for the linkage between attitude and intention, but not between intention and behavior. The second theory is the virtue ethics theory, in which our moral disposition, for example, virtue of care, virtue of temperance, are formed and developed through practice, iteration. So, under the model that we are proposing, by educating students to engage in virtuous character building, then they will likely to improve their moral awareness of environmental concerns and build their environmental attitudes toward implementing and enacting sustainable behavior. And the third theory is the transaction cost economics model developed by Dr. Williamson in 1981. So, transaction costs in our model will serve as the moderator to weaken the link between good intentions and actual sustainable behavior. So this is our proposed research model, and we have three propositions. The first proposition is the linkage between virtue ethics education and environmental awareness. The second proposition is the linkage between environmental awareness and the three constructs of the theory of plant behavior, including environmental attitude, I care about the environment, subjective norms, what others expect of me in terms of plastic consumption, and perceived behavioral control. Can I do it? Can I reduce plastic use, specifically single use plastics? And then next is the intention. I plan to use less plastic. And the last variable in the theory plant behavior is a sustainable behavior. I used less plastic last month. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, the transaction cost economics model will serve as the moderator to weaken the linkage between intention and behavior. And there are three transaction costs, ranging from search cost, the cost to find alternatives to plastic, a switching cost, replacing habits, upfront time and money, and information cost, uncertainty, and credibility. So we conducted some qualitative study to illustrate our model. We asked students enrolled in the business ethics and sustainability course to keep a diary or a journal for a week. And we had a sample of 28 students. So for a week, they had to keep a plastic and record their attempt to reduce plastic use. And through student journal, you can see their motivation to adopt responsible consumption, to reduce plastic use. But then they express a lot of frustration during that week, maybe from day 4 and day 5. And that frustration ultimately led them to reversing back to their old behavior. And I would like to give you a quote from a student's journal. The world around me is built for plastic. So, in terms of discussion, we would like to share with you that moral effort is cognitively exhausting. Students mentioned that it takes a lot of planning to make sure that the new habit sticks. And then they couldn't just follow through with the habit because of lack of alternatives or very expensive alternative products. For example, toothbrushes are made entirely out of plastic. So it's very difficult for them to completely lead a plastic free lifestyle. So that also shows that the search and switching costs play a very dominant role in students' decision to be responsible in terms of plastic consumption. And because of that, plastic use persists in, regardless of their behavior intention. So, in terms of our contribution and implication, our study extends a transaction cost economics model to individual behavior because so far we are not aware of a study that analyzes or that argues transaction cost economics model at the individual level. Most studies perceive and operationalize transaction costs at the organizational level. We also realize that virtue ethics education can strengthen moral commitment and enable some students to endure higher transaction costs, at least in the short term, because not all students experienced plastic reduction as feasible in the long term. And that highlights the need for an institutional barrier reduction, how to reduce the friction from the institutional governance point of view to help sustain moral behavior or sustainable behavior. We also acknowledge a limitation in our qualitative study in that some student journals might have been generated or assisted by AI, which could have biased the thematic findings. But we believe that this is negligible because the study was conducted as part of a regular course requirement with very little points worth out of the total points. So the incentive was not very much for students to cheat their responses using AI. We also would like future research to explore how moral awareness interventions can help reduce a perceived cost of sustainable choices. Future research could look at the durability of virtue based framing beyond short term assignments. And that is the end of our presentation. Thank you very much.